sexual assault in the workplace. Can I talk about that?
Yeah, please do.
Textbook solutions just don't work.
In this episode of the Powerhouse Diaries, I sit down with Lisa Oakley, the Navy SEAL of the HR world. HR traditionally has a bit of a dusty image.
My business scaled, and it scaled really quickly, and that was probably not a good thing. There's this expectation of women in society. 1950s housewife, picket fence, 2.5 children.
It's 2025, but it is still the reality to a degree.
No one tells you these things when you're in business. You just learn them on the fly.
She opens up about her own journey through a relationship breakup with a newborn, torching her old business to the ground and starting from scratch, and what it means to create a kick-ass company culture, receipts and all.
The number one thing that has the most significant impact on culture in organizations is...
This episode contains a discussion of sexual harassment, which may be triggering to some listeners. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. So, let's just start where it all gets down and dirty. You are postpartum, a new baby on your chest, dealing with a betrayal and an inbox full of other people's bullshit. Tell us what happened. Paint us a picture.
Paint you a picture. Wow. Okay, so my son was born in lockdown after a several-year IVF journey, and lots of contributing factors, endometriosis being one of them. You get told as a girl, just that's your period, love, suck it up, sunshine, until you realise when you can't have children that you need surgery.
It's such a big thing, and it's so under-discussed.
It's under-discussed. It's absolutely under-discussed, and I think that affects a lot of women, and they don't know. They get misdiagnosed with things like irritable bowel syndrome or just digestive problems, when in fact, anyway, there's a number of contributing factors to anyone's IVF journey. And then my son was born. I went back to work 3 weeks after my son was born. And that was lockdown, so no family could see us or support us during that time. I was doing day shift, I was doing night shift. I was pumping, so I was on Zoom calls with a pumping bra and then feeding and then jumping back on a Zoom call. Anyway.
But I mean, let's pause there for a second, because it's been a while for me. My kids are full-blown teenagers by now, but 3 weeks, I don't think I slept at all those first 3 weeks, especially with your first. And how did you not fall over?
I think doing day shift and night shift is tricky.
You reckon?
Functioning on very little sleep is difficult. You just push through. I think maybe it's instinct. Mother's instinct takes over. But coming to the crunch point when my now ex-husband decided that he was no longer going to be part of our lives, irreconcilable difference, fundamental, refusing counselling. The day my son had been to Starship for a suspected infection, just a viral thing.
And how old was he at this point?
Only a few months old.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
So I think rock bottom was doing the night shift with my son crying, me crying, collapsed into a chair, not dissimilar to this, going, how the hell did I end up here and what am I going to do about it?
Yeah. Oh my God. So how do you keep going in those moments?
I'm a big proponent of faith. I'm not a proponent of religion, interestingly enough, because, I guess I've just been let down. I've been let down by religion and people who are prescriptive in their interpretation of faith with various different sort of rules that you need to adhere to or else you don't fit in, kind of thing. So I think keeping your faith, whatever that means to you, is incredibly important, and just staying strong in that. I could talk to you also about resilience, because I learned a lot about resilience during that time.
Talk to me.
Resilience. Yeah. Because I like to do a bit of research. So when I get into a topic, or when I think I need to understand something a bit better, I'll crack into research. And a lot of my clients were talking with me about well-being and what does that mean in the context of COVID, and another sort of way of looking at well-being is resilience. And I learned, because I poured myself into this, that there's different, I suppose, aspects to resilience. I never really broke it down and thought about it. Mindset is obviously a critical component of resilience, and making sure that you frame things up positively and that you're optimistic and looking at the silver lining, which in fact there was, because my now ex-husband did me incredible favour. My life flourished probably since the day he left. It was just getting through the crises that was challenging for me. But also understanding your skills, your strengths, having a signature strength, almost like a superpower, and playing to that and making sure that you hold fast to that. I don't think as women we have to be good at as people. I don't think we have to be good at everything, but often the world teaches us that, or there's some sort of expectation around being good at everything. I think know what it is that you're really good at and go after that. And that kind of gave me this sense of self-worth, gave me a sense of confidence. I think the other thing is component, right, of resilience, you can't underestimate the power of a social network. And I really found out who in that moment of crises was going to be there for me, always going to be there for me, and who wasn't. Funny enough, not quite the people that I thought.
That's often the case, huh?
Yeah, not quite the people that I thought. So yeah, I think there's different elements, I suppose, or aspects to resilience. One of them is action, and I'm a big advocate for make good decisions quickly. Don't sit in your funk, just move forward. Like direction or projection or movement is really, really healthy, and just maintain that. Yeah.
Action breeds, like, regardless of what action, I think you can't go wrong, because action breeds momentum, which breeds results. Not necessarily the results you want, but then you see things moving, and then you can tweak and just rinse and repeat from there.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying about finding your superpower, because I think that builds the confidence as well, that you're like, okay, if I just focus on this, it will be okay. However, that's all nice and fine. But let's start with, what would you say your superpower is? What I have learned is you need to know your superpower. And one day I will.
Oh, one day I will, yeah, when I grow up. My superpower is finding solutions to complex people problems. So
that works in all situations, though. That's perfect.
I help specifically employers navigate conflict. So in the work that I do, there's lots of grievances, disputes, mediations, employment relations, investigations. I am a mediator. I'm a licensed private investigator for the purposes of employment investigations. It's the heavy, no one else wants to deal with it type of stuff that I get most satisfaction out of finding a solution to. Similarly, we do lots of sunshine and rainbows, human resources, so facilitation, leadership development, coaching, 360 development, team building, all of those good things. They're all people problems.
Yes, and I love the people problem aspect, because what I'm thinking, I'm still on the floor with your son crying, you crying, and what do? And that's how we got to resilience, right? And one of the tools to build resistance is knowing your superpower, you just mentioned. But I'm wondering, in that moment, with a crying baby, a partner that abandoned you, a business to run, COVID probably was still COVIDing, that your superpower in HR is not necessarily going to be the light at the end of the tunnel. However, what I love what you say, it's finding solutions to complex people problems. And in the end, I guess everything is a complex people problem, or a people problem, both personal and in work.
Absolutely.
You got through that dark night of the soul. You had your moment on the floor, picked yourself up, and decided to, can I say, burn your business to the ground? Is that, can we say that?
Yeah.
Is that true?
That's exactly right.
And fully start over.
Yeah.
And I'd love you to speak into that a little bit more, because it's something, when we initially met, resonated so deeply with me. I was in a similar situation. You don't hear that often. So tell us about that.
Okay. I set up a business to give myself a job. So my first foray into business was a business called Love Your Work. I love my work. I wanted other people to love their work. It was quite cute. It was quite cliche. I liked it. And that meant that I could go about doing what I do, in full swing, in flow with my superpower.
Yeah.
But what I realized quite quickly when I became a single mother practically overnight is that I wasn't going to be in a position to do that. Now I had all these other responsibilities. So I suppose I got some good advice and turned my mind from, I've effectively created a job for myself. And I think a lot of women go into business who are self-employed and just think that's it. So rather than just a job, I needed to establish a business. I needed some contingency. I needed to know that when my son wasn't well, I had somebody that was equally as competent or capable. Quality is really important signature or trademark for me and the work that I deliver. So I needed to know that there were other people that could step in that I could rely on to be able to substitute for me if something went down with my son. son. So I created an associate model, which is where People Associates came from. It was our second birthday yesterday.
Happy birthday.
So after a couple of years of operating in a totally different way, I've learned a huge amount about business and expanding a business, not just creating a job.
I actually think that is such a potent and powerful way to look at it, because like you say, so many people start their own business because of the quote unquote freedom, without realizing that they probably started because they're very good and passionate about doing a thing or creating a thing. And then that actually running a business is a lot of other things and very little of the actual thing you started doing to begin with. And you can really, like you have built initially a job for yourself that you could walk away from and have that security. You can also, guilty as charged, build a prison for yourself. So easily, because the business, if you don't create the systems and the team that you can rely on, it's you. And if you're not there with jazz hands, nothing happens. So the awareness of that is amazing. But how was the reality for someone who has been a lone wolf and done her thing to switch that whole model to a more collaborative way of doing life and business?
Very good question. So I'm not going to lie, my business scaled, and it scaled really quickly, and that was probably not a good thing. So as somebody who likes to work autonomously, solve people problems, probably chose to get out of corporate and managing people for a reason, because I enjoyed the autonomy, I enjoyed the independence, to all of a sudden become a managing consultant and be responsible for people delivering with different capability and capacity. To me, that was a big shock. That was a big adjustment. And if anything, in my first year, having scaled quite quickly, I learned the importance of engaging with really capable people. So phenomenal consultants, like don't compromise on quality when it comes to your
cut costs
team.
there.
And also, I suppose if you sort of say less than average consultants, less than average clients. And that was particularly a factor during COVID when you do a chunk of work for a client and then they would turn around and say they just couldn't pay your bill, which is sort of fair enough to an extent. And there's always circumstances where there's, you try and give leeway, but at the end of the day, you're effectively subcontracting work. We run an ethical model. We don't employ people that then get charged out at 10 times their value, their takeaway, which I think is particularly important to me because a large number of the folks that work with me are women. Their takeaway is good, in which case pretty low margin for me, in which case model really relies on volume, which contradicts the typical kind of consulting, sell your time type model. So to substitute my time in a managing consultant capacity, when actually what I loved was being on the tools, and actually what I loved is being in front of clients, was a massive turnaround for me. It was a massive shift for me. It was something I'm probably still coming to terms with.
What were the tools you used to kind of relinquish that control? Because that's often what it comes down to, right? Being a lone wolf, and you do have to unclench a little bit when you switch to that model. How did you manage to do that?
Yeah, I don't know if for me it was about control. What I uncovered was that I'd established these really strong working relationships with clients who then defaulted to wanting to work with me because of a particular style that I developed in working with them over a period of time. And the adjustment was not only for me, but also for the client to adapt to somebody else's style, which might not necessarily be wrong, but is different to me. I have hyper efficiency, I have hyper focus, and I managed to get through work quite quickly, and I enjoy that. Being responsive in our world is pretty important, because if somebody has a people issue, they want to get it solved quite quickly. They don't want it sitting on their mind, or they'll shop around kind of thing. So I guess it's just adjusting to different people's styles, not only myself, but understanding that chemistry between the client and the consultant, trying to find the right match, and actually getting it wrong, being okay with making those mistakes, failing forward, failing fast, and kind of adjusting. But no one tells you these things when you're in business. You just learn them on the fly.
Failing forward, failing fast. I think that should be on a tile somewhere. We should all print mugs with that, guys. So you have described to me that the work you do kind of has two parts. It's kind of the Navy SEALs work of HR, where you drop into a high stress, crazy situation, and then there's the unicorns and rainbows HR. Screw that for now. Let's stick to the Navy SEALs, because I'm intrigued. First of all, what is one of the craziest situations you've ever been airdropped in and just had to solve?
One of the craziest situations. I suppose every human resources professional has a little black book of weird, wild, and wonderful scenarios that would make your hair stand up on end. One of the most difficult situations that I think is more common than we would care to believe is effectively sexual assault in the workplace. Can I talk about that?
Yeah, please do, because so many of us are confronted with that in some way, shape, or form, be it in the workplace or elsewhere.
Exactly, yeah. So this is one of those situations where employers typically want to extract themselves, fair enough. There's potential criminal implications. And so often, whether it be retail, hospitality, other sort of environments, employees are subject to behaviour that is either highly offensive, inappropriate, or, worst of all, not consensual. And whether they know and understand that at the time or work that out after the fact, these are the sorts of crises, if you like, that I get pulled into.
Yeah.
And if there are traditional methods of dealing with conflict in the workplace that you could probably predict, textbook kind of solutions that would swing into play if there was a bullying, harassment complaint of sorts. Those kinds of textbook solutions just don't work in the sort of situation that I've just described.
Oh, I have so many follow-up questions. I think it's really important to stay here for a second, because my personal experience, unfortunately, we all know this, like sit in a room with 10 women and ask people's experience. It's distressing.
Yeah.
Is that the process of actually filing a complaint or reporting it is often more traumatic than the actual offense. I'm not minimizing the offense.
Yes, you're right.
But especially people who've gone through the court system that I know intimately, it has been harrowing. I'm just wondering, you get called in for the instances that have been reported. How much of that is out there, and how do you teach companies to create a safe space for people to come forward?
Okay, great questions. I think there's an element of psychological safety that comes with the culture of any environment. There's, I suppose, two different types of environments. One where there are systemic cultural issues and these things go on and people don't feel safe to come forward, and then absolutely, as you described, it's more traumatic for them when they do. Or there are environments where employers, managers, business owners, leaders are just completely blindsided because this happened. They've got a great culture. They're working really hard on the various different inputs into that culture to get the right sort of outputs. And this is just a freak event or incident that's kind of shattered that for them. Yeah. So two quite unique situations there, or circumstances that could apply.
And do you ever feel conflicted as the consultant who's often, brought in by higher management, owners, assuming that's where the problem lies, right? Not necessarily with those people, but, the power imbalance. Do you ever feel conflicted to be called in to kind of clean up a mess from the perspective of the employer, whereas a woman, but as a human, you struggle finding an approach that honors everyone involved?
My job is to inform employers of their legal obligations, their health and safety obligations, their obligations with respect to privacy. And my moral compass, ethical compass can sometimes interfere with what advice I'm giving. So if I'm ever in that situation, I've got good, thanks to the associate model, peers that I can talk through these situations with. Yeah. I can give you an example if you want.
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, so recently I dealt with a situation where a general manager who'd been in the business for 20 odd years, who is nearing retirement age and highly regarded in his community, grandchildren, that sort of thing, had a sexual encounter with an apprentice, same gender, 22 years old, only been with the business for a short while, came forward after the fact and said that alcohol was involved and that, potentially it wasn't consensual. I'm informing the employer of their obligations with respect to investigate or not to investigate the individual's right to silence if the complainant pursues a criminal allegation, etc. So I suppose for me, putting aside the age difference, putting aside the gender difference, different strokes for different folks. You know what I mean? I sort of have to look at the situation and think, even if it was a 47-year-old, 45-year-old, or whatever it might be, the power imbalance, you know, sort of neutralizing any sort of factors in the situation that might make it particularly kind of disconcerting, in particular the age one, you know, working it through and going, if it was these two people, similar age, would the same outcome apply? And the answer is kind of yes, because of the power imbalance in the situation is totally inappropriate. So I think, just helping me work through that. The employer, funny enough, contacted me because they wanted me to mediate a safety plan between these two individuals. And the reason they wanted me to mediate a safety plan, and I said to them, good luck finding a mediator on this planet that will do that. The reason they wanted me to mediate a safety plan is because they were really concerned that they would lose the general manager and that would affect their business and the sustainability of their business.
I get it from a business point of view. But, you know, the reason's not the well-being. It's not actually, it's just that we want to make sure.
I don't even know where to begin in respect of that. The PR nightmare that would be if anybody found that out. The sleeping at night knowing that you're complicit in this potentially happening if it happened again. Do you know what I mean? Because you've allowed it to happen. Sadly, in more situations than not, one or other or both people exit the organisation, and in this case that's what occurred. Both left.
So that's a perfect bridge actually to my next question, because you navigate chaos for a living. So how do you keep from absorbing it all, taking it home, and or how do you not lie awake at night wondering, did you do the right thing?
In terms of keeping awake at night doing the right thing, I think my approach, my practice is very pragmatic, but also very mana enhancing, dignified towards the individuals. I think I've got equal parts empathy and commercial kind of acumen in terms of what the best outcome is for all parties in a situation to allow everyone to kind of move forward constructively, right? But in terms of the resilience component, I suppose coming back to that, or how do I not absorb? Maybe it's my character, maybe it's my nature, maybe it's my upbringing or my DNA. I just tend to have skin like a rhino. So perhaps I've built up a resistance to taking these things home. Definitely, you know, this is going to sound cliche.
I love
but
it.
Definitely keeping on top of your own personal well-being, which means different things for different people.
What does it mean for you? What does that look like for you?
I probably take way too many vitamins, and maybe that's just marketing, but I feel like I'm doing good for my body every time I take a vitamin. But
I love that. Your urine is fluorescent.
Pretty much. So I just think doing what feels right for you in terms of your own personal well-being, whether it be vitamins or fresh air or sunshine or exercise or hydration or sleep. I'm a big proponent of sleep as well. We've got to get a decent amount of sleep. I don't really function very well on a short amount of sleep. So whatever that looks like for you, and just trying to be disciplined about it. Routine habits and routine kind of ultimately define the outcomes, in our lives.
And has that changed over the years, your tolerance for, call it injustice or bullshit, as you have gone through your own transitions, and I guess also softened in a way? Yes, resilience initially to get through, but has that changed for you?
Has my approach to justice, if you want to call it that, has that changed? I think if I did a strengths survey, you know, the Gallup strengths survey, I would come out off the charts on justice. You know, I come out on achievement, orientation, learning agility, and all sorts of other things. But justice is just kind of one of those streaks that has maybe I was born with. That is hardwired.
Maybe she was born with it.
Hardwired. I guess that makes me a really competent or confident advocate, because I just won't let something go, whether I'm advocating for an employee's rights, trying to convince a client that they need to perhaps take a different tact here, or whether I'm advocating for an employer's position. It's it's a trait that I'm stuck with. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline.
Maybe it's just Lisa. You have told me that you've been called to like a school event for your son and like expected to bake, you know, trays full of muffins and do all the things. And you've openly just kind of said, fuck that. Like, no, not my strength. Do you want a pitch deck? Like, I'll give you a PowerPoint. That's not the default role for you. And like you said before, you can't do it all, be it all the time. How has that been, that journey into motherhood, especially around other parents, because I found that could be quite a jarring difference between the two worlds and the kind of judgment from time to time if you choose to work full time and build your business and not bake muffins.
I think especially as somebody who grew up in the church and spends a bit of time around kind of church or community organisations, there is this natural expectation of women to just show up with home baking. I can bake, don't get me wrong. If I put my mind to it, it's coming out of the oven, hot. But I'd kind of sort of much rather order some fresh salads for dinner, or even farro chicken lasagna, which, by the way, my single friends, quote unquote, think is better than sex. So if you haven't tried it, farro chicken lasagna.
Well, they're single, so maybe they haven't had sex in a while.
Yeah. So I think I take your point. There's this expectation of women in society, which is around, 1950s housewife, picket fence, 2.5 children, not, I suppose, extending yourself in a business or commercial environment. And the compromises that we make, they're trade-offs. They're not necessarily... it doesn't swing, the pendulum doesn't swing one way 24/7. You can still bake and be in stilettos or steel caps or whatever it is that takes your fancy out there. I guess it's redefining what the expectations are, because again, my upbringing, I was sort of trained to think that you had to do it all, that you almost had to martyr yourself to the point of exhaustion or burnout in order
to be a good girl.
It was like a expectation. It was essential that you just had it all together. And I admittedly don't have it all together. Some people might think that I'm selfish, but I kind of prioritize and go, I'm going to do this and I'm going to outsource those things. And maybe some of my family members would look at me and go, oh my gosh, how can she do that? Really, it's not that extreme. Yeah, probably if I was a bloke, they would be doing that. Because it just makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
No one would even bat an eyelid.
No one would bat an eyelid. Okay, I spend a bit of money on a cleaner every week or whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean? And we have this guilt or shame, or I bought baking that wasn't home baked to the bake thing. But that doesn't make me any less of a contributor.
No, absolutely. I love that. And I love what you say about reframing what the expectations are. Now, you can't reframe what other people's expectations are, but you can really make peace and prioritize within your own world. Was that a difficult process? Because it's years and years of programming you're shifting.
Yes.
Excellent.
I think that's the most impactful answer. I don't know if I have all the answers to that, but
no. But I mean, do you have? Because I'm thinking that it's so powerful what you're describing, and it's something that all of us, everyone listening, deal with, right? The expectation. I've said this before in another conversation. Like, we're expected to raise kids as if we don't run a business, and we're expected to run our businesses as if we don't have kids. And it's 2025, but it is still the reality to a degree. Now, I also believe we impose a lot of that ourselves.
Ourselves, we do.
So as someone who's successfully managed to turn at least a good chunk of that guilt into different processes, call it SOPs, for your life on how to, where your priorities lie. How do you do that? Or do you have any tips on how to shift that guilt to a new
I think it comes down to defining who you want to be as a mother, as a sister, as a daughter, as a partner, as a friend. I think it comes down to defining that. And actually, once you're okay with it, other people need to be okay with it, and the adjustment takes place with them or not. And I think of certain people in my life who just couldn't cope with the choices that I've made. And that's on them. And I'm okay with that, because I'm really happy with the life that I've created for myself, for my family.
If you have that clarity on who you want to be and how you want to show up, and then you still contort to meet some invisible force's expectation or someone's expectation, it's treason. It won't end well. Okay, let's go into HR for a little bit, and culture, because HR traditionally, I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm saying something really rude, has a bit of a dusty image.
You're not wrong. That's absolutely right.
Whew, thank you. It's been a long time since I worked in corporate and there was such a thing as HR in my life. But it's so, actually circling back to the beginning, everything is a people's problem. Like everything is about people. Anyone I ask, what do they love the most about what they do? It's the people. Anything what is the most frustrating and difficult to navigate? It's people. And that's true in life and it's true in business. So what is one HR myth or belief that most founders get wrong? That if they knew that from the beginning, set that up differently, life would be a lot different. You'd be out of business.
Okay, what is one HR myth that founders get wrong? I think as a founder, how you build your business depends on the people that you surround yourself with, and the quality or the kind of credibility of their advice. And one thing I would say is that in this country in particular, we don't train our HR professionals very well. So coming back to your point about HR is a bit dusty, but compliance orientated, a bit of a handbrake, getting in the way in terms of the outcome of the organization's objectives or, success or results or whatever that looks like for the particular organization, product, service, whatever. I think founders actually should be pretty wary of the types of advice that they're getting and where they're getting it from. Because in my experience, whether it's your accounting advice, marketing advice, financial advice, actually trust your gut and challenge those service providers, even legal advice. In my experience with lawyers, it's about saying, this is the outcome that I'm trying to achieve. Help me get to the outcome. More often than not, and again, I focus on HR because that's my discipline, a business owner or founder will approach an HR professional and say, how do I solve for this problem? And they just get riddled with, well, this is a process and you can't do this and how about that? And so it's so overwhelming. Whereas I think if you push your partners, if you push your advisors, if you push those people that are providing service to your organization to really focus on the outcome and the result and be quite specific about the fact that you want it in a time efficient way that doesn't introduce additional risk to your organization, is cost effective, is values aligned, then you're going to get good outcomes. But I think if you just kind of go along with what people suggest or advise, you'll end up being pulled in lots of different directions, or it will be time consuming and costly.
What I'm hearing you say is really come at it from a human perspective. What is it that you're trying to achieve, and then reverse engineer?
That's right. Gut feel is, what's best for your business as a founder. So when I'm advising a business owner, I really genuinely want to know what outcome they want. I can spin them theory, I can spin them legislation till I'm blue in the face. That's actually not what they're paying for. They can look that up on the internet. Do you know what I mean? So they need my help to actually find the solution to the problem. And I just feel founders quite often will take advice thinking, I'm an engineer, or I'm an expert in this particular discipline or area, or this is my signature strength, and I'm relying on this contractor or service provider to give me advice because they are the expert. But ensure that you inject yourself in the way in which you want to resolve the problem, whatever it is, financial or otherwise. Ensure that you inject yourself sufficiently so that the service provider is cued to get the outcome that you want.
I love that. So we all talk about culture. Right, it's so important. Culture. And I agree. But it's also such a hype word and so intangible. So for anyone listening, female founders all over the world, different stages of their business, whether they are kind of designing it or already further along, how do you cultivate company culture? And it feels so intangible.
Love that. Okay, so culture, eat strategy for breakfast. But you develop culture much in the same way as you develop strategy. So one thing that I like to do in terms of talking about culture is break it down for people, because it can seem like an overwhelming, indescribable, conceptual thing that's hard to grasp. So systems, processes, norms, all these things are hard to, I suppose, define or reach or understand. Fundamentally, and there's lots of different interpretations on this, you can think about culture as a metaphor, you can think about it as a system. For the listeners' purposes, I think particularly for founders, what it's really helpful to think about is culture as a system which has inputs, processes and outputs. And you might think that's a bit of a strange way to think about culture, but if we look at it for a tick in terms of the outputs, you will have or you will desire individual, team, organizational outputs of a particular culture, right? Individual intention to stay, retention, satisfaction, motivation, engagement, all those things. Team, innovation, collaboration, all those things. Organizational, there might be financial, there might be market share, there might be customer sat metrics. You have all of these particular outcomes that you're seeking. What are then the respective inputs in order to secure those outputs? And I think if we think about culture in that way, and we define specifically what the inputs are that are going to ensure that we get those respective outputs, whatever our industry or discipline is, then we're going to be able to focus quite clearly on the specific areas to be able to address.
Help me understand this, because for me, when I hear culture, and that's maybe just my lack of knowledge around the subject, it feels like the so important, but often considered more like fluffy bits on top, the sprinkles on top that make people kind of feel
warm, fuzzy, fluffy, nice to do, those sorts of things.
Right. Like that's at least what I think. When I think culture, I'm like, that's like, I come in and I have a feeling like I belong, and this is what's a company culture. I don't immediately go processes. What am I not understanding?
Okay, great question. I think culture is very misunderstood, because you're right. The superficial interpretation of culture is the warm, fuzzy feeling and how we achieve that. If we break it down, the thing that has the largest impact, if you think of a balance sheet, balance sheet, there's revenue, cost, different levers you can pull to increase revenue, decrease cost to get an improved bottom line, to get a EBITDA or NPAT or whatever you're trying to achieve. Culture is pretty much the same. If you want to improve the culture, there's certain levers that you can pull to kind of increase these outputs I've talked about, or decrease the consequences of not doing the right things that then ultimately contribute to your sort of cultural bottom line. The number one thing that has the most significant impact on culture in organizations is leadership. So if we think about how to affect leadership, that's probably the number one area of influencing the outputs that I've described. When we go into organizations and we do cultural reviews, so this is like a organization in crises. Doesn't matter if it's a dozen people or 50 people, we'll effectively sit down over a period of however many days it takes, interview them all. What works well? How can it be even better? Are there behaviors that are inconsistent with your values? Are there behaviors that are considered bullying, harassment, whatever it might be? When we actually explore a culture with that kind of anthropological lens, we find there are a series of kind of culture killers, if you like. And the culture
tell
killers...
us about the culture killers.
The culture killers outside of leadership are things like tools and systems. Really, I can't do my job effectively because I don't have the tools to do my job. How basic is that? And a founder would just go, okay, that's such an easy thing to solve. So, right, tools, systems, processes. So I know it sounds a bit boring, but when I say processes, I mean things like performance management processes, onboarding processes. Like, how do we create an environment?
It makes total sense from that perspective.
So it is a bit of a bore in terms of the process side of things. But I guess they're the ingredients to achieving the outputs that you want. And it's an easier way to think about a conceptual, idealistic topic like culture.
Last question. I can't choose. I have so many more. What are some of the most common signs of toxicity in a workplace, and how can a founder turn that around? Because I remember when I had my agency, when in the moments where there was an issue with an employee, and in the beginning I made the mistake of like letting them work out the last, or still work the last weeks of their contract. That was something I learned, slow to hire, fast to fire. Like don't let that kind of fester, because that's exactly what will happen. And I found that incredibly near impossible to turn around the impact that a toxic person or a toxic situation, not necessarily the person's fault, can create, and the ripple effect it creates in a team. So how can someone turn that around? And is there like a through line of a common toxic situation?
A thread. Yeah, I think there is. So I could talk about so much, but if I boiled it down to the number one most important thing for founders, create a feedback culture in your organization. And you're going to think, what on earth does that mean, and why is that important? In New Zealand, stereotypically, which is where we are today, our leaders avoid conflict. That can often, Yeah, we'll pause there for effect. Our leaders can often avoid conflict, and that can create outcomes that are not necessarily desirable. So passive aggressive behaviors are allowed to go on, and that sort of toxic, septic cultural undertone happens. Aggressive behaviors are tolerated, and that kind of sets a new standard for what's above the line and below the line. And these things kind of go head to head in an environment and are left unmanaged. Whether it's somebody that's not performing effectively, in which case you need to sit them down and have a conversation about what the expectations are and what good looks like and how to close that gap, or whether it's somebody that's an absolute superstar that doesn't get any acknowledgement or recognition or feedback, and therefore they go elsewhere because they think, why should I bother? We're just not good, I don't think, at giving and receiving feedback. I deal with so many situations. I mean, bullying harassment is a perfect example. If everybody calibrated, everyone knows what's going on in an environment typically where there's a bully, right? It's transparent as the day is day. But no one chooses to act. No one chooses to intervene. Everybody keeps themselves to themselves. So I guess if we empower our workforce and our leaders to have a feedback culture, say what needs to be said, do it with radical candor or otherwise, pick a methodology, whatever methodology, just get cracking with it. But don't let it, I suppose, what you ignore, you tolerate, and then it replicates in that environment, and then you really can't pull it back from the brink. Start with, this is feedback, and use a model. Situation, behavior, impact is a fantastic model. We used to teach people the shit sandwich model. I love your shoes. By the way, you did that wrong. Have a nice day. We used to teach people this rubbish. Here's how to give feedback. Let's give it in a way that's impactful, that helps people understand there's a stimulus, there's a behavior, there's an impact or a consequence, and how could they do that better next time through this learning lens, rather than it being an offense to them to receive feedback.
Amazing.
Hope that helps.
It helps a lot. And actually, let's go in a separate little video. Let's go into that model. I think that's something, if that's possible, that everyone would love to hear.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you so much. I learned so much today. I absolutely loved it. And thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Yala. You're an absolute inspiration to women everywhere.
Stop it.
We appreciate you. It's been a privilege.
Awesome.